Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Smoller. I am the Director of Educational Programs here with the National History Academy. And today we are continuing on through our journey of different historic sites across the nation. And we are joined today by Park Ranger John Fowler at the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House and National Historic Site. So John, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'd love to hear more about this site and your work there. And we're ready when you are.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I am John Fowler, and I am the Park Ranger at National Capital Parks East, which is a conglomerate of national parks located east of the river in Washington, D.C., and into the Maryland suburbs. And I do have a PowerPoint to share with you all today, so I'm going to pull that up. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that. So again, I'm the Park Ranger at National Capital Parks East. And as a Park Ranger, I'm responsible for helping to preserve, steward, and interpret our nation's cultural and historical resources. I've been with the Park Service now for 12 years. I have a bachelor's degree in history. I have a master's degree in history. I majored in public history for my master's degree. So public history is essentially what I'm doing now, taking history outside of the classroom. And you can learn about a lot of history visiting some of our nation's national parks. So I have the honor of working at the 3 homes located in Washington, D.C. that are national parks that celebrate the contributions of African Americans in United States history. Those 3 homes are the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, located in Southeast Washington, the Carter G. Woodson Home National Historic Site, located in Northwest Washington, the Shaw neighborhood, and the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site, located in Logan Circle neighborhood, Northwest DC. The Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site is the 287th unit of the National Park System. This home was built in 1875, ironically, which is the same year as Mary McLeod Bethune's birth, and purchased by Mary McLeod Bethune and the National Council of Negro Women to serve as the organization's first national headquarters on December 18th, 1943. Additionally, the home served as Mary McLeod Bethune's last residence in the nation's capital. So when she was in Washington working, the last 6 years of her time as a DC resident, the council house is where she lived from 1944 until 1949. So for 22 years, the National Council of Negro Women's Council House was the place where strategies were spearheaded and programs were developed that advanced the interests of African American women and women of color all over the world. The home also served as the place where Mrs. Bethune achieved her greatest national and international recognition that is in part bringing her back to the nation's memory 67 years after her death, because a statue of Mary McLeod Bethune is being placed in National Statuary Hall in the United States Capitol, representing the state of Florida. And so she is very much still alive today. But we're going to talk a little bit about who Mary McLeod Bethune was, where she came from, before we get to why she and the National Council of Negro Women, which is this national park, why they felt the need to purchase this home. So by the time Mary McLeod Bethune becomes a DC resident in 1936, she is considered to be one of the most important figures in the United States. She's born July 10th, 1875 in Maysville, South Carolina, the 15th of 17 children. She's the first to be born free, as well as the first to receive an education. And being the first in her family to be born free, the first to receive an education, contributed to her being able to think and dream bigger than her enslaved family members. And her big dreams remained an aspect of her character for the rest of her life. If you have studied Mary McLeod Bethune and a lot of her speeches, her writings, you will see that she talks about how she is a dreamer. And when you come to the council house to take a tour, you will learn how Mrs. Bethune was an effective leader. She was able to get people to believe in what it was she saw. She was able to get people to accept her vision. And that's an important aspect of being a leader. Mrs. Bethune is educated by the Presbyterian Church, and she sets out to become a missionary. However, when she writes the Presbyterian Church after graduating from school, they are not sending African Americans to Africa to be missionaries. So she was very upset, but she decided that if she could not become a missionary, she could stay here in America and still fulfill this missionary aspect by starting her own school for African American girls. On October 3rd, 1904, with $1.50, faith in God, 5 little girls plus her son Albert, she began the Daytona Literary and Industrial Training School for Negro girls, which would eventually become internationally known as Bethune-Cookman College. It is now a university in Daytona Beach, Florida. So not only is Mary McLeod Bethune one of the first women in the United States to start a school, particularly in the South, but she's the first African-American woman to serve as a college president. And the images that you see just showcase the growth and evolution of the school there in Daytona Beach, Florida. So in addition to her work as a leading educator and college president, Mrs. Bethune was very much involved in the struggle for civil rights for African Americans, equal rights for women, in particular Black women. She is a member or officer in various organizations that deal with these issues, such as the NAACP, the National Urban League, and the Florida Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. In 1924, she becomes the 8th national president of the National Association of Colored Women, NACW. And this was the highest position that a Black woman in America could then aspire. In this position, Mrs. Bethune was seen as essentially the leader of Black women's clubs and organizations. So she was responsible for responding to issues dealing with all aspects of Black womanhood in America, but also throughout the world. She becomes a consultant to presidents of the United States as well. So her work in education and organizations led to her being recognized by presidents of the United States. The first 2 presidents that she would have met and worked with would have been Presidents Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. And then in 1935, she was approached by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So 1935 turns out to be an important year in Mary McLeod Bethune's life. 1935, on June 28th of that year, she was awarded the Spingarn Medal, which was the NAACP's highest honor, and it was given annually. A few weeks later, she receives a call from President Franklin Roosevelt to serve as a special advisor to the National Youth Administration. So by this time, the Great Depression is in full effect, and the National Youth Administration was one of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal agencies or programs that was created to combat the Great Depression. The National Youth Administration created jobs and vocational training for youth ages 16 to 25. Mrs. Bethune, since she was seen as a leading educator, particularly of African Americans, she was brought in to address creating jobs and vocational training, education training for Black youth. In December of that year, December 5th to be exact, Mrs. Bethune also created the National Council of Negro Women at the 137th Street branch of the YWCA in New York City. So I told you that she was president of the NACW, the National Association of Colored Women. But by the time her presidency of the NACW came to an end in 1928, she realized that this organization had started to outgrow its usefulness. So in 1929, she announced plans to create a new organization. So it took her 6 years to create this new organization. So that is why she creates the NCNW, the National Council of Negro Women. So December 5th, 1935, Mrs. Bethune and 29 other outstanding women of the day were present to establish the NCNW. These women were the leading representatives of national organizations, community organizations, women's organizations dealing with education, healthcare, nursing, religious organizations, fraternal organizations, business associations. The minutes of the National Council of Negro Women reflect Mrs. Bethune as having said the following: "Most people think that I am a dreamer. Through dreams, many things have come true. I am interested in women and I believe in their possibilities. The world has not been willing to accept the contributions that women have made. Their influence has been felt more definitively in the past 10 years than ever before. We need vision for larger things, for the unfolding and reviewing of worthwhile things." So there were a lot of people, a lot of women who did not support the idea of starting this new organization because they felt there were already so many Black women's organizations. But they decided that if Mrs. Bethune wanted to do this, they would throw their support behind her. And so Mrs. Bethune at this same meeting was elected the first national president of the NCNW as well. So the following year, in 1936, Mary McLeod Bethune is appointed the director of the Division of Negro Affairs within the National Youth Administration. So President Roosevelt was so impressed with her work that he created her own department or division within the NYA. So at the age of 61, Mary McLeod Bethune became the first African-American woman to head a federal agency. So when you put that in context, when you look at the historic election of Vice President Kamala Harris, you look at all of the amazing women who have held office, not only in the nation's government, but held offices in prestigious organizations, women like Mary McLeod Bethune were trailblazers. So for the next 12 years, Mrs. Bethune takes Washington, D.C. by storm. So she's born in Maysville, South Carolina. She eventually relocates to Daytona Beach, Florida to build her school. But for a period of time, she stayed in Washington. So she becomes a DC resident, and as the head of the National Youth Administration, she holds 2 national White House conferences on the problems of the Negro and Negro youth. That is how they described African Americans back then. She would have been the organizer of the Federal Council on Negro Affairs, also known as the Black Cabinet or the Black Brain Trust in the Black press. You see an image of the council there. Mrs. Bethune, in most photographs, you'll see she's either the only woman or the only African American, so you can imagine what that would have been like. The Federal Council on Negro Affairs was essentially an informal presidential cabinet to the Roosevelt administration. They addressed issues affecting Black Americans and made those issues and concerns known to President Roosevelt and his administration. Excuse me. Mrs. Bethune is also president of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, which was the organization established by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was known as the father of African American history. Carter G. Woodson is also the man who started Negro History Week in 1926, which we celebrate today as Black History Month. So in Mrs. Bethune's position as the director of the National Youth Administration's Division of Negro Affairs, she lectured and visited states all throughout the country, speaking about the programs of the National Youth Administration. And in doing so, she also rose or brought about awareness, not only for her school and other historically Black colleges and universities, but also she brought awareness to the work of the National Council of Negro Women. Mrs. Bethune also would disseminate Black history throughout her speeches and in her presentations. And so people got a real good grasp of who this strong, amazing, dignified African-American woman was when she spoke to them about all the things that she was working on and all of the issues affecting African Americans in the United States and throughout the world for that matter. Mrs. Bethune propels the National Council of Negro Women to the forefront of women's organizations by extending contacts to every major social, educational, governmental, and community organization. She works with other organizations, the YWCA, labor unions. The National Council of Negro Women collected, analyzed, and disseminated data regarding the employment of African Americans in federal jobs. And they became known for their frequent visits to the White House, to the US Capitol, to departmental buildings, et cetera, throughout Washington, DC. And this is very important to note. Mary McLeod Bethune and these women were very instrumental in helping to change the image of African Americans, in particular, African American women. In most cases, back during these times, African Americans were depicted in very negative, stereotypical roles or images as Uncle Toms, as Sambos. Black women were depicted as mammies or Jezebels, domestics. But Mary McLeod Bethune and the National Council of Negro Women helped to change that image by presenting themselves in fine clothes, in hats, wearing gloves, wearing furs. And so they helped to change that image. And a lot of the help came from the role of the press, particularly the Black press. Whenever Mary McLeod Bethune and the National Council of Negro Women were out speaking or going places or having programs, they made sure they had photographers there to capture images, they had made sure they had reporters there to write down and publish their exploits in newspapers and magazines throughout the country. Mary McLeod Bethune and the NCNW became involved in the war effort as well. In 1941, when the War Department failed to invite representatives of the NCNW or any other Black women's organization to join the representatives of 31 other organizations in the planning of an advisory council on soldiers' welfare, Mrs. Bethune wrote a letter in protest saying that we are anxious for you to know that we want to be and insist upon being considered a part of our American democracy, not something apart from it. We are not blind to what is happening. We are not humiliated. We are incensed. We want Negro representation to be included in this advisory council and in all future plans sponsored for the purpose of promoting morale and strengthening our defense. So once Stimson read the letter, not only was the National Council of Negro Women accepted, but African-American women were also accepted into the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps and the Women's Army for Volunteer and Emergency Services. And Mary McLeod Bethune personally recruited the first 40 African-American women to serve in the armed forces. They served as WACs, the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. So again, Mary McLeod Bethune personally hand-selected, she picked the first 40 Black women to serve in this nation's armed forces. So would you believe that all the work that I was telling you that NCNW and Mrs. Bethune had been doing up to this point, all had been done in Mrs. Bethune's living room? So the National Council of Negro Women needed a headquarters. They needed a place, a space where they could conduct their business, where they could hold meetings, where they could do the work that they needed to get done. So Mrs. Bethune and the council set out to find such a place. And they found such a place at 1318 Vermont Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., in what was called Iowa Circle at one point in time. It's now Logan Circle. They found this 3-story Victorian row home. Again, it was built in 1875, and it was purchased in 1943 for $15,500 to serve as the council's first headquarters. So they dedicated the building October 15th, 1944. Here was the dedicatory program for the building. And here are images from the dedication. Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, was the keynote speaker for the event. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the Council House. And again, the Council House today is a national park. So the Council House was to be headquarters for the organization. Mrs. Bethune was also able to live there. And also, this was a place where the council could transact business, where other organizations could rent out office space, where they could hold events, because Washington was still a segregated city. And so with that in mind, if you were Black, if you were a Black woman in particular, there were certain places that you were not allowed. And so you could come to the council house if you were met with that discrimination. So we have images of the ornate staircase there in the home. The parlor is probably one of the most important rooms of the home. The parlor was also not just the living room, but also the place where formal gatherings were held, press conferences, award ceremonies, meetings. The chandelier that you see in the photograph here and in these next photographs, the chandelier, according to NCNW folklore, came from the White House. During the Truman administration, the White House was undergoing a renovation, and Mrs. Bethune happened to be there one day, and she saw them taking down the chandelier, and she asked the workers, what do you want to do with this chandelier? And they responded that either it would be tossed in the garbage or put in storage. And so Mrs. Bethune was appalled. And so she asked if she could have it, since, it was just going to either be tossed or put in storage. And they allowed her to do so. So she brought that chandelier back and had it installed and hung in the parlor of the council house. And so Mrs. Bethune would often say, we have not because we ask not. She understood that closed mouths did not get fed. She believed in asking for help, and she thought it was important for women, in particular Black women, to ask for what they wanted, to make demands just as other groups of people made demands. And so she wanted the headquarters for her organization to be classy and elegant, and certainly that chandelier is or helps to make the home that way. You see the piano, you see the flags on the piano representing the flags of the United Nations. All types of people would have come to the council house to work with Ms. Bethune and the National Council of Negro Women. Entertainer Josephine Baker is seen here in the photograph on the right. And here is the parlor today. The menorahs that you see represent the National Council of Negro Women and other organizations, for that matter, working together across racial and religious lines. You would have had Jewish Americans working with Black Americans during the Civil Rights Movement. So that is very important to know. Just about every room of the council house was fully furnished by organizations that made up the National Council of Negro Women or individuals affiliated with those organizations. So the idea for the National Council, so the National Council concept, as Mrs. Bethune would say, it was like a wheel. And the organizations that made up the council were like the spokes on a wheel. So again, the council served as an umbrella of organizations, I should say. And so these organizations, the Daughter of the Elks, sororities, nursing associations, teaching associations, these are the types of groups, organizations, associations that joined up under the National Council of Negro Women. Moving right along to the boardroom, probably the most important room in the home. This is where the council held their business meetings. This is where they argued, they strategized, they dissected, they planned, they implemented issues affecting Black women, their families, their communities, and also issues affecting Black Americans throughout the world. The table and chair set that you see here in this image and in the next images is the most important artifact in the home. Like the chandelier, the table and chair set was given to, well, Mrs. Bethune got the chandelier, but the table and chair set that you see was donated by Congressman William Dawson from Chicago, Illinois. And he gave the council this table and chair set it actually used to sit in the US Capitol. Mrs. Bethune said that when she had meetings, she wanted furniture, she wanted things that looked like, you know, how it looked in places like the White House, in places like Congress, in places like these important departmental buildings. Again, she wanted Black people, Black women to have the best. Again, you see the multi-purpose use of this room. Again, the multi-purpose use of the home itself. You had all types of events and gatherings, formal dinners, banquets for heads of state from all over the world. They're having tea here in this next image. And here is the boardroom today. So you come and visit the council house, you will see that original chandelier. You will see the original conference boardroom table and chairs. The boardroom is also where Mary McLeod Bethune and the National Council of Negro Women began preserving African-American women's history. As early as 1939, the council started an archives committee, and they asked their members to send their precious heirlooms, their objects, their important documents, so they could be preserved in their archive. So one of the reasons why Mrs. Bethune wanted a place, a headquarters for the council, was so that they could have a space dedicated in this home or in their building, their headquarters, to hold this archive. So they began the National Archives for Negro Women's History. And the image on the right is of Mrs. Bethune with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who I talked about a few moments ago, the father of African-American history. She was inspired by Dr. Woodson and his work in creating Negro History Week and helping to preserve and disseminate Black history, that she decided to focus on Black women's history. At the Council House, the council published their newsletter, the Telefact. They published their own quarterly magazine, the Afro-American Women's Journal, which was later named Women United. And so they were able to get information out to the different chapters of the council, to all the members. They sent these items or these publications to libraries so people could take subscriptions at libraries, to colleges and universities, community centers. So the work of the council was not just something happening in DC. It was not just something happening regionally. This was a national and international organization. Up on the second floor, you will see the president's bedroom. The bed that you see in the image on the right is not the bed that Mrs. Bethune would have slept in, as you see here on the left image, but this bed is actually one of the beds that's original to the third floor of the home. So in addition to the many uses or purposes for the council house, the third floor of the home was allocated as boarding room space for Black women when they were denied access to stay in hotels and motels in the nation's capital. So Mary McLeod Bethune felt that it was important that Black women have a safe space to rest and to gather themselves. So they opened up the third floor of the council house to women as boarding room spaces. The president's office is where Mrs. Bethune would have taken phone calls and held meetings, as well as worked with the various secretaries of the organization to get out mass mailings for their meetings, conferences, and annual events. The furniture in the office was furnished by Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which is this country's second African-American sorority established on the campus of Howard University. Mrs. Bethune was an honorary member of Delta Sigma Theta. The image on the right, you see the furniture that Delta Sigma Theta donated that's still there in the council house when you visit today. And this is the only image that we have of one of the rooms up on the third floor, those boarding rooms for women when they came into Washington, D.C. Mary McLeod Bethune was one of the 3 African-American delegates sent from the NAACP to the first meeting of the United Nations in San Francisco, California in 1945. So a lot of work for the historic conference would have been initiated from 1318 Vermont Avenue Northwest. Mrs. Bethune would have also worked with President Harriet Tubman as well. So she advised 4 presidents of the United States. She's again mostly known for her affiliation with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The National Council of Negro Women also would have sold $2 million in war bonds to get a Liberty ship named and built for Harriet Tubman. So during this time period, they had commissioned 17 Liberty ships to be built. Liberty ships carried people, equipment during times of war. The SS Harriet Tubman was the only Liberty ship named for an African-American woman. So that planning took place at the council house as well. Mary McLeod Bethune retires from the NCNW as president in 1949. After she retires, she turns the organization over to very capable women. The second president, Dr. Dorothy Bolden Farabee, the third president, Vivian Carter Mason, and the fourth president, Dr. Dorothy Irene Height. I invite you all to learn more about these three amazing women. They are very important in not only Black history, but certainly women's history and American history as well. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, August 28th, 1963, was an important event in American history, certainly in civil rights history. By this time, Dr. Dorothy Height, who's pictured that you see with Dr. King, Dorothy Height is the president of the NCNW at this time, the fourth national president. And so she would have been instrumental in helping to plan the march. And she opened up the home for other organizations to do some of the planning there at the house as well. In fact, some of the members of NCNW actually met at the council house to board buses to drive down to the larger march. You'll see an image of that in a moment. But I just wanted to point out, I don't know if you all can tell, but that is a park ranger standing behind Dr. King. When you see the images of Dr. King from the march as he's delivering his speech, you will see park rangers there beside him on either side. And you can always recognize the park ranger from the uniform, from the patch. You can see the patch there. I have the patch here on my arm, and then also from our flat hats. And again, these are images from NCNW members boarding the bus to drive down to the larger march at the mall. The council house was also the planning for the Mary McLeod Bethune Memorial in Lincoln Park. Mary McLeod Bethune, by this time, would have passed away. She dies May 18th, 1955. And the National Council of Negro Women under Dr. Dorothy Height's administration got the idea to erect a monument or memorial to Mrs. Bethune in Lincoln Park here in Washington, D.C., where you have the statue of President Abraham Lincoln with the kneeling enslaved man. I don't know if you all may be familiar with Lincoln Park here in DC or not, but the council worked 15 years to get this monument erected, and it was eventually erected July 10th, 1974, on the 99th anniversary of Mary McLeod Bethune's birthday. So this is the first, or this was the first statue of an African-American and a woman to be erected on federal land or in a public park in the nation's capital. When they erected the monument, over 18,000 people attended the dedication in Lincoln Park on July 10th, 1974. And what's so fascinating about this moment in history is that originally the statue of Lincoln faced west toward the Capitol. Dorothy Height and the National Council of Negro Women lobbied Congress. They got permission from Congress to not only place Mrs. Bethune's statue at the other end of the park, but to rotate the statue of Abraham Lincoln so that it faced Mrs. Bethune's. Again, that is historic. You have Lincoln, who, of course, issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which is the document that essentially, they say, freed the enslaved people. And then you have Mary McLeod Bethune on one end, or the other end, the daughter of enslaved people who became this great leader in our nation's government. So it's a great juxtaposition. And then again, images of the dedication of the statue. The council had to relocate from the council house in January of 1966 due to a fire. So the house was empty for about a decade. Then in 1979, or the late 70s, I should say, Dr. Height got the idea to restore the home and to open to the public as a museum and archives for Black women's history. They also formally created the National Archives for Black women's history. They enlisted the help of Dr. Betty Collier Thomas, noted historian, author, activist, to help or assist with the restoration effort. So the National Archives for Black Women's History is the only repository in America that is dedicated to preserving and disseminating Black women's history. So that archive still exists today. The nucleus of that archive are the records of the National Council of Negro Women and other notable Black women and their organizations. In 1982, an act of Congress declared the property a National Historic Site. And then on October 1st, 1995, we were officially incorporated into, the National Park System. So again, the Mary McLeod Bethune Council House National Historic Site is the 287th unit of the National Park Service. So the archive, and again, in addition to the actual house, the archive holds various collections, doll collections. We have clothing that belonged to Mrs. Bethune as well. It's now located off-site at our center in Landover, Maryland. So you can always call our archivist to conduct research. I thank you all for your time. I hope that you all can visit us on our website. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And as of tomorrow, we will be reopening to the public on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. So if you're in Washington, stop by and see us. Thank you so much.
John, thank you so much, and great timing. I didn't know that. I'm looking forward to coming and visiting.
Yes.
I know we're a little over time, but we do have a couple questions if you still have time.
Sure, yes.
Great. All right. So we're going to have Ben Kellerhalls join us. He is the intern here at National History Academy. So Ben,
yeah. Great presentation. I just want to preface going through some questions by saying I study American history, African American history in college. This is my emphasis, and most things you mentioned I've not even talked about in my classes. So great presentation. It goes to show how much there is to start talking about. So let's get into some questions. Okay. Why is it that women in so many different areas seem to be at the center or forefront of preserving history, or their version or their voice in history? That's probably alluding to the Daughters of the American Revolution, as well as the Daughters of the Confederacy, and these women groups at this time that had such a big influence on education.
That's a good question. I think, of course, I'm not a woman, so I don't really know how to answer this, but I think it has a lot to do with women are just natural leaders. Women, of course, are the mothers, and they are the first teachers for children. And what I've found in studying American history, particularly as it relates to Black women's history, as a subject, as you said, a lot of these leaders, a lot of the women who started these organizations, they were school founders. So they had the ability to be able to not only, teach and start schools, but they understood that sometimes you had to take, teaching and education outside of the classroom. And so I think that when you do that, that tends to lead to, women working or serving in these various capacities. Mary McLeod Bethune would have, again, as you saw, led several organizations. She was instrumental in helping to preserve institutions and organizations as well. Frederick Douglass's home, it's a national park site today, but for many years, Black women like Mary McLeod Bethune helped to preserve it. So I think it just depends on, but women are just effective leaders. So that's why they are so good at that. And then also, when you look at the civil rights movement existed because of Black women or women in general. They talk about a lot about the male leaders, but it was the women who did a lot of the, footwork, the groundwork. So I always like to make sure that when you come to the council house, that message is, made clear.
Yeah, and such an important message. That sort of ties into the next question. We saw just the other day the granddaughter of Ida B. Wells honored at the signing of the Emmett Till Act, and it's that sort of, I guess you might say, new wave consciousness for people that should have been praised and talked about this whole time. So as a site, as a public historian and all these things, how do you deal with, or how do you present these lasting impacts, especially in today's climate surrounding history, surrounding Black history and these things?
You just simply tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. And I know that's something that seemingly is, not common today. But when you come to the council house, when you come to the Douglas home, when you come to the Woodson home, you're going to be told the truth about American history. And I think that's just very important. A lot of the opportunities that we have today are possible because of the contributions of people who worked to try to make this country, to make the world a better place. And so it's important that you tell the truth, and it's important that young people today know how the doors that they're going through, how those doors were opened.
Yeah, and these things are all so relevant still. We just got another question in. Do you have any documents related to the council's support of Fannie Lou Hamer's Freedom Farm Cooperative?
I believe we do, actually. In our archive, you can email our archivist. I'm trying to remember, Lord, I can't think of the email address for our archives now, but we do have something in the archive related to the Freedom Farm Cooperative. We actually, on our Facebook page, we have a video of, I don't think it's the Freedom Farm Cooperative, but it's one of NCNW's initiatives that allowed Black women, in the South to build homes, farms, things of that nature. Fannie Lou Hamer was a member of NCNW. She was a good friend of Dr. Dorothy Height. So yes, thank you for that question. You can find some of those records in our archive.
Awesome. I think you've given us a lot of good information. We could go all day, but I guess for our own time constraints, I'll get to sort of our final question, which is always, being that you gave us such a great presentation, you're obviously so well educated in these things and talk about these things, what might you say for advice for anyone out there that might want to get into this line of work, this kind of preserving history, and what does public history entail?
Yeah. So again, public history entails taking history outside of the classroom. So museums, archives, national parks, these are the types of places where young people can, learn about history. These are the types of places where young people can intern. During my undergraduate time, I graduated from the University of the District of Columbia, and one of my professors was a park ranger, and she came to class in her park uniform. And at this time, I had heard of the Park Service. I had been to, national park sites, but I did not understand, what the Park Service was about. It wasn't registering with me. And so, through speaking with her and working with her and learning from her, she told me about the National Park Service. And that is how I got into the Park Service. And so there are all types of internships available. with the Park Service. You can always volunteer at museums as well. Again, in my undergraduate career, I volunteered at our museum there on campus at UDC, the Felix E. Grant Jazz Archives, one of the only jazz archives in the world. You know, so volunteer at some of these places. If you're interested in learning more about this aspect of history, if you're interested in you know, working hands-on, go and talk to the curators, the archivists, volunteer, ask them about their work. And, you know, it could lead to other opportunities.
That was great. John, this whole presentation was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you all so much.
Right. And looking forward to visiting, maybe tomorrow, but glad to hear it's opening back up, and
Yes.
we'll look forward to it. And thank you again. Everyone else, we'll see you back here next week, same time as we continue our series, and have a wonderful rest of your day.